A palette full of color, we'll leave the truth uncovered, cause only lies are white. We use the words we write to shine a light on life. My light is lava like it's hot and burning bright. Now read, recall, record, recite. We covered every angle.
We are back with another episode of And Cyn. I am Cynthia Dorsey.
I'm Veronique McRae.
And it's so great to have you guys with us again.
Yes.
In this room. We are so excited to get started. Veronique, can you introduce us to the playwright we will be reviewing today?
Yes. So today we will be learning about playwright Donna Dael Orlandersmith Brown, but in the playwright world, she is known as Dael Orlandersmith. And she was actually born in 1959 in New York. She grew up in public housing in New York in the East Harlem neighborhood. And it's stated that she lost her father when she was young when doing research on her. But her mother made it a point to actually put her in Roman Catholic school. And it was here that her teacher started encouraging her to take acting classes. And so this is kind of where her beginning started in the fields of the arts. At that time, she ended up getting connected as a teenager with the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. And then she attended Hunter College and settled in New York's East Village area in the 1980s. After that, returning from Hunter College, that's when she started writing dramatic scenes, completing performance assignments. Her classmates were asking, like, who written them? It was Dael. She then studied at HB Studio in Greenwich Village in New York City. And from there, we kind of start to see her career form in the 1990s. She reconnected back with that Nuyorican poet group, and that allowed her to tour. So she toured in Europe, she toured in Australia, and from that point, her work started being picked up, recognized more for her poetry. I mean, she was getting noticed, and she also entered into playwriting. Now, one interesting fact that we learned about her as we studied for the work that we're going to discuss today, she was actually on a show called Spin City at a certain point, but the producers told her that she needed to lose weight. She's a very tall, statuesque, beautiful woman. But we see that in this pattern, unfortunately, with acting, and that kind of catapulted her or shifted her into playwriting pretty much full time after that stint on Spin City. Some of the works that she's more known for are Yellow Man and My Red Hand, My Backhand, Beauty's Daughter, Monster, The Gimmick, which is a collection of 3 plays, Black and Blue Boys / Broken Men. And she also achieved a lot of awards in her area. And because she has such a list, I'm actually going to read that list. It's a significant amount for me to memorize. So we're now going to the notes so I can share about the brilliance of Orlandersmith. So she's a Pulitzer Prize nominee. She was recognized, including the Flora Roberts Award, which is a New York Foundation for the Arts grant, the Helen Merrill Award for Emerging Playwrights. She had a nomination for an Off-Broadway Alliance Award, Best Solo Performance in 2015, a nomination for the Joseph Jefferson Equity Awards, Solo Performance 2013, the 2005 Penn Laurel Pels Foundation Award, the Lucille Lortel Foundation Playwrights Fellowship, and an Obie Award for Beauty's Daughter. Mind you, we haven't even mentioned the play that we're going to dive into today that she wrote, which is in reference to actually a set of interviews that she took in reference to the shooting of Michael Brown. And that is the piece we're going to kind of zone in on today.
Yes. Wow. We are going to be discussing her play Until the Fllod, which is a set of monologues where she conducted interviews post the murder of Michael Brown in St. Louis in 2014. The play has the same feel as when we discuss Fires in the Mirror, or even Veronique's play Suicide Journals. It connects a common thread of interviews discussing the topic of race, police brutality, community, all from people who happen to be in the Ferguson area. The actual play has 9 monologues. The characters are Louisa, Rusty, Hassan, Connie, Ruben, Doug Ray, Paul, Edna, and the narrator. Different genders, multiple ethnicities, different backgrounds, different demographics altogether, all very different accounts on what their world is like. What we both seem to have discussed post, um, you know, devouring this body of work is that we all often were shocked at the responses the community gave in response to how Black and brown boys and men are treated in their community. I can specifically think of one character, Doug Ray, I believe. Doug Ray grew up in West Virginia. Trailer park is what he says. He's trailer park trash, um, but was into reading books and, you know, um, his father was an alcoholic. His father came home one evening, took his books and burned it. And Doug Ray essentially beat his father. He beat him and then left West Virginia and never turned back. He said he didn't have any help from anybody. But he managed to graduate college. He managed to buy property in Ferguson, and that's why he was in Ferguson during this interview. Um, he also has police friends and carries weapons and is raising children, and even encouraged his children not to fear the Black boys. Um, he even talks about an account where he told his 5-year-old son to beat another Black boy for pushing him. And so these sort of like accounts happen throughout the play of people of different races where they feel like the police have the right to kill and shoot unarmed Black and brown people, and hearing that is gut wrenching to both of us. I would say is that, you know, it's very shocking to hear this come from white people, but it's equally as shocking to hear it come from those who experience poverty, those who've experienced oppression, those who look like us, you know.
Right.
And so I do believe like this body of work has my brain churning in that what we deem as a united community, and that, you know, Black Lives Matter, and we are fighting for the respect, one, but just for the acknowledgement that beyond the color of our skin, we are human beings and we deserve not to be killed um, when we are unarmed. We deserve that. We deserve to be treated fairly. Um, but to know that though we feel this way, there are people in our community who do not feel the same way. Um, Black people in our community who do not feel the same way. I think about the barber in the story.
Right.
Um, Yeah, so I think that's where we are with it. What do you think?
Um, I think for me, and maybe the word was when we were having post discussion, uncomfortable, because I just felt like this reiterates everything that we're trying to fight against, right? And to know that that sentimentality, that thought process was not just from white counterparts, but black counterparts. You're like, well, man, what are we fighting for? We're not even on the same page, right? Like, don't you realize that your life matters, that you should have the chance to defend yourself, that even if you're doing something wrong, you're unarmed, right? Like, and I've two of them, and you know that character names always slip me, but like the young teenager
Yeah.
who was wrestling with, like, you know, yeah, I want the cop to come into my face too. You know, I want
Hassan.
Hassan, yes, and I'm like, the struggle that he had is that, just that struggle, but to know you walk around like that, and sometimes it's like you don't want to fear somebody. Sometimes you want them to know I don't fear you, but you know, even if you go in their face, it gives the room for them to take action, and it just hurt because I'm like, so many youth feel that way. But then, like you were saying, like with the barber, just I don't know. I think for me, it's kind of daunting. It's kind of shocking to realize that somewhere, even in the mindset of us, we've lessened our own value to think that it's okay. Whether you did something wrong or not, because I know one of the monologues were like, he was getting ready to graduate, and why do you have to go get the cigarette? Even if he did something wrong, it never gives the right for the life to be taken. He was unarmed. He wasn't going to do anything, you know. It's almost like we've adopted these same stereotypes about ourselves, or these same notions of, if you would just comply. And we know there's a ton of examples where compliance doesn't matter, non-compliance doesn't matter, armed doesn't matter, unarmed doesn't matter. You know, that's a whole train of thought processes, you know, we could get into. But I think that's kind of what hurt about this piece, because, you know, it's factual, right? You know, it's based off of people's interviews. So to know that this is what we're thinking, it almost, to me, gives more room to say, well, yeah, well, see, they agree. You know, so how do you stand up for that? And it doesn't make you better than anyone else, but it's like, how can you see that that's actually not okay? That your life does matter more than that, that his life mattered more than a pack of cigarettes, you know, that George Floyd's life mattered more than a $20 bill, that Sandra, you know, Bland's life mattered more than a busted tail light. That, because it seems like we've adopted this mentality too, like, well, you know, the police have the right police. They are there to serve and protect, but not to wield unbrandished, you know, abuse of power. And I think that's what hurt, because I think the lines have been blurred, and people, whether black or white or whatever background, there's people out there that actually don't see that difference and are unable to admit that, unfortunately, there is reform that needs to take place. And I think that's what was so daunting about the play. I'm like, if you know, historically, whether you like to admit it or not, police grew out of the slave patrol. So there is still a racial factor that needs to be eliminated. The whole country was founded on racism and slavery. So you can't erase those facts. They are the very fabric that needs to be unwoven. So I think the play just kind of, let me say, brilliantly written. Brilliantly written, okay? She's brilliant, and I see why she has the stack of awards. It's just brilliant, the way she weaved, and it went right into one or the other. It hurt. It made me uncomfortable. And, you know, that opening monologue, I was on the opening monologue, I was like, yeah, you know, she's standing up, and yeah, no, Uncle Tom, such, and then it just went, and I was like, Oh man,
But that's art, right? It's
yeah,
supposed to reflect the times. This whole movement makes me uncomfortable.
right.
I'm definitely one of the ones who has gone down a rabbit hole watching the surveillance footage and the body cam footage and the passerby foot. Like I've gone down these rabbit holes just trying to understand. And there is no explanation for it. There is absolutely no explanation that Mike Brown could be walking towards you with his hands up and you shoot him because he had stolen a pack of cigarillos. There's it's not logic enough for me to grasp the why and for all of these cases like it's I can't. And so for us to watch and read a body of work that has characters justifying this sort of behavior, it's uneasy. But it also puts the world in perspective that everybody ain't going to be on your side. Everybody's
Right.
not going to believe, and this is something we may never get over. You know what I mean? This is
Mhm.
something that everybody wants peace. I want peace. I want equity. I want equality. And these are some things that might never happen. We
Which
have
hurts.
Yeah, it hurts. And we have to figure out a way to get beyond that without losing our voice, without, pushing for it, without silencing ourselves with fear. Um, I think that this body of work is opening our eyes because we have to see beyond our bubbles and beyond what is happening. I think what was interesting is as a playwright and as a writer and actor, um just the age differences of the characters.
Hmm.
So if you're looking for a monologue, anybody's looking for, you could definitely get this piece and find your age bracket in it for sure. Um, we had the privilege of watching Studio Theater's production of it. This
Hmm.
play started out with Dael doing it herself as a one woman show, which we love on and see. But Studio did it with three actors who played both the male and female characters. If you want to stretch yourself, I would definitely grab this play and go
Hmm.
ahead and if you're a female, play Hassan. If you're a male, play Louisa. Practice, physicality and voice because this is a great tool. I feel like for actors to use in your training.
Hmm.
Um, Another thing that I really, really am grateful for, even though it made me uncomfortable, is that her interview with the ex police officer
Yes.
and how, um, you know, we don't necessarily hear the police officer's point of views. We hear um, what the communications director comes up for them to say, what their lawyer comes up for them to say,
Hmm.
but we never really hear exactly what was going through their mind in that situation. Like, what did you see? What did you hear? We don't get that from them. I imagine in years to come we might get a few tell-all books. But right now we're just left with this open-ended. I just think about like George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, who murdered George Floyd, and his demeanor and like smirkish um, behavior
Hmm.
that we see plastered all over the media, and it's enraging, right? But as a person who goes down these rabbit holes. I want to know what are you thinking? Like, I want to hear you say what you're thinking. I would rather hear I put my knee on his neck because he wouldn't shut the fuck up. Like, I would,
Right.
that's me. That's just me. It's enraging, but I just would rather hear it. I would rather you say it than anything. You know what I'm saying? So in the play, we have an ex-officer who talks about being pro-white. Says, and even says, that doesn't mean I'm against Black people, but I'm pro-white. He talks about the police force being a brotherhood, and that if a Black officer joins the police force, that he needs to be good, but we are a brotherhood regardless. And they come together and they support each other. If a police officer had to pull a gun and shoot, then he had to pull a gun and shoot, and we protect that officer because we are a brotherhood. And we know that, right? We know that we could talk about that all day when it appears, but to hear that being said in her interview, just like, thank you for that. I really appreciate Dael including this particular character in the pieces we don't necessarily hear, that that's the truth. That is the absolute truth. And this guy is raising a son who's the polar opposite of him, who is out there marching with people in Ferguson, and he's like, why are you doing that? And he doesn't want to appear to be a villain in his son's eyes, but he's attached to the police force till death do him part, essentially. So that's another angle too, that we don't necessarily learn about or hear about, is how these people who are pro-white and pro-Trump have children who are not, and how those children are trying to maneuver through the world. Was very insightful, I feel like, in this piece as well.
Yeah, his character, that particular character, stood out for me as well. But I think one of the things that stood out, because it's like you start feeling empathy, and then you go kind of like this I get it, and then I don't, like this wrestling, because you still look at, you're still human. But I think one of the things that stood out to him too, especially with the son, so thank you for mentioning that, because I think it takes a lot. I believe it takes a lot to be an ally and someone standing against generational practice. So for people who come from families that and they're trying to break those chains, many of them do become ostracized, right? They're fighting tradition and and conditioning, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. And also, but there was also something in those monologues when the officer said, and in that moment, I'm fearful because I don't know if what he's going to do. And then I have to decide if this is a person or a nigger. And for me, what stood out is that I still feel like that's the disparity, because if a white man or a white teenager is in front of you, you're not then deciding if that's a white teenager or a nigger, because a nigger is disposable to you, right? And I'm like, that's a pressure that's only carried by POCs, by Black people, that you have to decide whether I'm human Black or a nigger in that moment, or whether you pull a trigger or put a knee on a neck, right? You don't have those questions. I think about him still in the cigarillos, and I think about how for a very brief time, I taught at a very affluent, private, predominantly white high school. And the things that these children got into, the things that these children did that were covered up or locked in records or erased, were far greater grievances than stealing a pack of cigarettes. But how they get to walk away, they get to live, they get to make mistakes and go ahead. And so So his character brought out a lot of different feelings, a lot between the interaction with the son, between hearing that voice, like you said, that you don't normally hear, between seeing still when you look at in that heat of the moment, you then still look at us like you get to decide whether we're human or not. We're human regardless. But you don't have that factor. You're not saying is this a white person or or a cracker. You're not doing that. You're saying is this a black person or a nigger, and then you take it into your hands to shoot. And that's where I'm like, it's still not right. I don't care what you say, it's not right. There's too many cases. Like I just watched something the other day. The guy had a gun in the truck. I mean, he was surrounded by cops. They had their guns drawn. He told them what he wasn't going to do, what he had in there, and he drove off unscathed. But Philando Castile complied, let him know that there was a weapon in the car, wasn't doing anything, got shot in front of his daughter. You see, there's still, there's still this ingrained mindset that you get to decide whether, when you see that brown skin, whether that person is human or not. And how, and that's, a frustration when listening to the interviews, like you said, will that ever change? My father watches politics and news all day, but it was kind of disheartening because for whatever reason I never did the math. And then I was like, one day it popped up and so I was like, my dad went to segregated school. School was segregated. When my father went to school, it was segregated. I'm not that old. So you can't sit here and say that we're so far removed from anything. My living father went to segregated school. When he went to NC State, he was one of 4 Black students. He was an anomaly. He went through things there. And for him to sit and say, after all these years, you would think stuff would change. We try to make stuff change, but it's just worse. And I don't even know if it's worse or if it's just with technology, you get to see it more, but it just hasn't changed. And so when people try to say we're so removed, we're not. And I think that's, like you said, how do you live with this if it doesn't change?
You guys, I highly suggest you read this play. I also know for sure you can watch Dael perform it online. And I'll just put the link right on the screen for you so that you can check it out. I am grateful that Veronique and I got to watch Studio Theater's production of it. And just shout out to those 3 phenomenal actresses.
Yes.
That stretched themselves and really committed to the work that it takes to put on a play of this depth, of this much depth. So I'm really, really super impressed with those 3 actresses for sure.
Yeah, they were phenomenal.
Yeah, and if you want to see that production, I know it's been extended, so I'll go ahead and also drop Studio Theater's link so you can stream the play there as well. We have a powerhouse coming on next. We're going to interview her and also have her read for Louisa because I think Louisa would be a good reading for her from Until the Fllod.
Now it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce our artist of the day, Mintzy Paige. She is a phenomenal, gifted soul actress, singer, educator, and just overall beautiful spirit that I have had the honor of knowing for such a long time and watching and then later teaming up with. So welcome to And Cyn, Mintzy. Thank you so much for agreeing with Cynthia and I. So we will jump right in and we're just going to go with the flow. So how has 2021 started off for you?
2021 has started off very interesting for me. I have a new position. I was in Durham Public Schools and now I am in Chapel Hill Carver City Schools. I'm back with Chapel Hill Carver City Schools. And I also have a new position And so I am now an instructional coach, which means I work with teachers and we work on best practices and curriculum and growth mindset. And it's new for me. And so trying to learn that and build relationships during COVID has been really challenging. And but I am loving it, having fun, kind of missing the classroom, but it is what it is, right? Progress upward.
I'm right with you. I'm in education too, and like this virtual space of teaching is it has been very interesting, but I mean I don't have a lot of negative feelings towards it. I
Right.
think stepping up for children the way
Yeah.
in which teachers are doing in this time is very important, and I'm really thoroughly impressed of like the creativity in what is required of our jobs. So shout out to you for being an instructional coach and helping guide teachers with that creativity, because I know that job is not easy. I wanted to ask you about your start, how you got into acting and performing.
So when we were younger, we had to do something in church. It was a must. And so I was in everything, but my passion was the junior choir. So that's how it started. And then doing church plays. And after that, once I got into high school and tried out for Falcon Song, I went to Jordan High School. And so I auditioned for show choir, made it in show choir. And then I also tried out for the plays and I was picked for them. And it became a passion of mine to be in plays and to act. I never really thought of myself as an actor initially, and quite honestly, I still don't. But I do love it. I love acting. I love becoming someone else. Reading has always been my passion, and so trying to be other characters just to get inside of a story has been a big thing with me since I was little. So I really do like putting on a different face and becoming someone else. That's always been fun for me. So I do love acting. Any chance I can get on a stage, I get on a stage. So shout out to you all for allowing me to be in your works and helping you get your works to come to life.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that process? Maybe if there's a particular role you've done so far that maybe was more difficult or it took an extensive process to get into, and what were some of the things that you would do to embody that role?
I think well, people always cast me as the singer, right? And the first time I got a chance to really come out of that was a play called Behind Closed Doors. And it was a play that was written about domestic violence. The writer had experienced domestic violence and had a friend that was actually killed because of domestic violence. So she wrote a play, and one of the things that she wanted to make sure she did was to write the play from a male and female perspective. I think, Veronique, you know me well, so playing the role of the victim was kind of hard for me because I can be combative, I can be argumentative. So to play a role of a person that, was kind of, well, not kind of, was very much diminished, so to speak, and had to keep quiet. I'm definitely not a person that will keep quiet, but having to be that person, I really had to uh, read up on some things. I had to watch certain things. My kids were home at the time, so they would role play with me, but a lot of it was just trying to honestly put myself into the role of what if there was a person that was so strong and had this stronghold over me that I wanted to please them. And it just really was about research. And that's when I realized how much research actors really had to do, especially if they wanted to pull off a scene or a role, and really become that person. It is research. And so that's one of the things that I did, and allowed myself to be coached. I think that's the other thing. You have to allow yourself to be coached and really put yourself inside of it, and working with people that push you, and make you think about things that you never really thought about. I was bullied in elementary school, and that's probably part of the reason why I am so vocal, and can be argumentative and combative, because I was bullied when I was younger. So having to draw from those emotions, and remembering the way that I felt then, helped put me into that role. So and method acting, people actually grabbing on you and shaking you, and you allowing yourself to be grabbed or pushed or hit, was interesting. So that helped.
You're an educator, you're in education. You talked a lot about how you started out in church and you started out in high school. You had lots of roles in high school. Where do you think what do you think the state of education is right now, especially pertaining to arts education?
I think it kind of depends on where you are. When you work in a place where holistic um, growth mindset and being well-rounded is in the forefront, I think that you have the arts. Working with Chapel Hill Carver City Schools, they have money, and that's not a secret. So, when you're trying to say that you can produce well-rounded individuals, and you can help individuals show who they are, and you can actually say that you are there to help them showcase that and flourish into that. I think the arts is something that's thought of as protected and needed and necessary. I think when you're talking about places that aren't as affluent, then those kinds of cuts are going to be made. Do we put what little funds we have into education and maintaining this building? Or do we try to get someone to act or sing or play an instrument? I think it really all depends on where you are. And I've been fortunate to be in a place where we can continue with the arts, but I do think that is sad that we do have some places where it's becoming something that is put on the back burner. And if we don't have the funds for it, then we just simply can't have it, because we can't hire someone in that position. So we have to cut that position. We can't afford the instruments, so we have to cut that whole entire program. So I think it really all depends on where you are.
I know that you just mentioned about the holistic development if you have schools that have the resources to do that. Have you ever worked at a school that didn't have those resources? And if so, do you see a difference, or what differences do you see when the arts are incorporated for children versus not having them accessible?
What I see is I have once, and what I saw was what money or funds were available was put into sports, and so sports was pushed as that outlet. You seem to have kids that will create those spaces. Um, the question is, do you make a space where they can do that safely? For example, lunchtime. Do you allow kids to be inside your room and just have that? Do you stay after school and allow kids to have that, and then talk to your admin to have a space or a time where they can do like a reading over the announcements, or do a talent show, or do some kind of production. I did a choir when I was at Brogdon, and we did have COVID, so we didn't get a chance to perform. We were going to perform at graduation for those kids, but we didn't get a chance to do that because of COVID, and we ended in March. We also had the debate club, and we also had kids that wanted to act. And so we gave them that venue. We did it in the hallways. And then, talk to admin, can we do something at lunch? And we kind of sold it as, if we can give kids something to do at lunch, give them a focus where they're not just sitting there. It takes them 10 minutes to eat. You give them 40 minutes inside of this space. They're going to find something to do. Why not make it constructive? So there are ways you can get around not having funding. It's just a matter of where your passion is and what do you want to feed into the kids that you work with.
I love that. I love, like, it's just proof, like, the arts will thrive if you breathe into it. Like, if you breathe life into it. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I love, like, if you want to sing in this hallway, you can sing in
In
this
the hallway.
If you want to paint, I just love that. Where do you hope to see yourself as your whole self in the world? Like, in Mintzy's perfect world, where are you?
In Mintzy's perfect world, I would like to start my own tutoring and be able to get our Black and brown kids that are underserved, get them those supports that they need, that the school may not be able to give to them, or they don't feel welcomed, or they may feel ashamed because they need the extra help. But at the same time, we have parents that can't afford $65 an hour, right? $75 an hour. And as a person that has worked for tutoring companies, I can't get you everything you need in that hour. We're going to have to go over. So when you start talking about working with someone for an hour, knowing that they're going to need more, knowing that, being a single parent, having 2 kids, 3 kids, you can't afford that. And so I see myself trying to actually trying to work on that now to establish um, a tutorial base whereby kids can get the help that they need. I just need to figure out how to get the funding and get the tutors paid, or at least get some volunteers that are willing to work with kids on a regular basis. I've worked with a couple of programs, but they didn't sustain for whatever reason. People have other things that they want to be committed to, especially if they're not getting paid, right? So what kind of incentives can we do to keep adults outside of tapping into the colleges? What kind of incentives can we offer other adults to help? And also peer tutoring. What kind of incentives can we give kids in the community to help other kids? And there is research that supports sometimes we can hear things better from people who are our own age, who are our own gender, or the gender we identify with. And so that's one of the things that I would love to work on. And being in this position now can help me further work on those ideas.
And building on Cynthia's question about Mintzy's perfect world, I want to go to the other part of your perfect world. What would be, so it'll be a two-part question. What would be an ideal role that you would want to play, a certain type of character or story that you would want? And part two of the question is, have you seen that role developed yet or commonly accessible in the entertainment realm of today?
The perfect role. That's funny because I was actually talking about this last week. I would say the perfect role would be the different facets of being a Black woman. I think we've had, like, the women of Brewster Place. We've had those stories, but just honestly doing more of that. We're not all the same. We don't all have the same story. And just honestly looking at what it means to be a Black woman, what it means to be a Black mother, a Black grandmother, and not so much of the stereotypical. There are people that are between the poorest of the poor and the Huxtables, right? Being part of that group, that middle, where I didn't make enough money to get social services. Well, I made too much money to get social services, but I didn't make enough to maintain a household of 3, right? What about that woman? What is her story? We talk about women going through welfare. We talk about women who work so hard that they don't have to do that. But what is that in between story? Because we either jump here or we stay here. What is the in between story? When things are good, or when you get home and your lights are off and your child is looking at you like, why are lights off? You know, what do you tell them? Your child wakes up and you're washing them up because you have a well. You can't afford to get that well fixed till the end of the month. And it's like the 7th of the month it's going to cost $2,500. You don't have $2,500. You're really not going to have it at the end of the month, but you'll make it work. At least you have that time. But, you know, and they're looking at you and they're saying, it's cold in your house. Why we don't have water? Why are we having to heat water this way and pouring water into the bathtub? You know, where is that story? So that's one of the things I would like to see developed more. That woman that is in the middle and how she navigates that. You know, when the world tells her, I can't give you assistance because I don't see how you're not going to be in this same situation next month. So they don't give you assistance. You know, my lights are off now. I don't care about next month. I'm talking about now, but they won't give it to you. Or you go to social service and they say, well, you're out of the bracket. You make too much money. You know, where is her story and how does she navigate that? What was the second part?
The second part, do you see roles that tell that story currently?
Not a lot. I see that they may show snippets, they may touch on it, but honestly, for my experience, I don't see that middle woman a lot. I don't see her. And if I do see her, I see her at rock bottom, and then they'll show a little bit of something here, and then all of a sudden she's at the top. I would like to see that develop more like they did with Will Smith. What was that? Something happiness.
Pursuit of Happiness.
The Pursuit of Happiness. I think they developed it with him pretty well from the male perspective, and kudos to that. But you know, do they really do that with the Black woman? So I would love to see that. I don't think I've seen enough of that.
I think that's you know, kind of what motivates us to do this show, is to find Black women who write for Black women. So we cover, you know, the Black female playwrights and trying to see how they are writing us so we can, you know, produce their work and learn more about them. Like if you Google right now, Black female playwrights, it's like even Google isn't feeding us. You got to do some deep dives to find these women. Yeah. And it's really, really sad. Like you say, you know, I'm wondering, like, when you audition and you go into an audition room and they say, hey, Mintzy, like, here's some sides. We need you to do a cold reading. What do you do to prepare for that?
Oh, how much time do you give that person to prepare? It's I think it depends on how much time you get to prepare. And my experience with a lot of cold reads is they say, okay, you got 2 minutes, or you got a minute, and then we want you to bring it. And you know, you're like, bring it. And for me, a person who don't really consider herself an actress, really, it's like, bring what? Like, who is this person? I haven't even had time to study who this person is. So basically what I do is I just try to skim it, and I pick a voice. And sometimes I change, right? In mid-read, because I'll be reading, I'm like, that's the wrong voice, so I'll have to change it. But yeah, you read it, you go for it. I'm an avid reader, so it is not really hard for me, but it's definitely not something that's easy, and quite honest, I'm not comfortable with it. But that's basically how I do cold reads. I go for it. If they say go for it, I go for it. So
All right. Well, we're going to take you through one right now, like we do
Of course you
all of
will.
our guests on the show. It's like one of the favorite parts of the show. Whenever you're ready, you can just start. I believe you have a monologue, which is will be great to see you read. So whenever you're
Okay.
ready.
All right. Okay. I graduated high school and went to City College in New York. By then it was the 60s, and there was no race riots in St. Louis, period. But when I was in New York, I went to protests, I participated in boycotts, and heard about the race riots in Chicago and Indiana. Those riots, my God, that put fire in me. Yes, I was on fire. Sometimes when I came home to visit, I'd sense a hostility, not with my family, but with certain white and Black people. There was a hatred directed towards me. Once I was in a store in Normandy to get my mother some fabric. And again, the woman, a white woman, I knew her all my life. Mrs. Wexton was one of the folk my family made small talk with when they came into her shop. So this day, I came in, and by then it was 1969, 70. And she said, "Oh, Louisa, haven't seen you in such a long time." And I say, "Well, Miss Wexton, I've been living in New York studying at City College." And suddenly her face dropped. It just dropped. And she said, "Another one." And then I said, "Ma'am?" And she says, "All the colored folk, uh, sorry, should I say Black? Because all of you are Black now. All the Blacks are going to Chicago or New York, forgetting where they came from. Maybe it's better you leave that way. You won't be causing any trouble here." I looked at her in disbelief and again said, "Ma'am?" And then said, "Mrs. Wexton, I changed my mind. I don't want to buy anything from your store." I turned around and walked out, and her mouth fell open. But what stays with me is the Black girl that worked for her. As Mrs. Wexton and I had this exchange, there was a Black girl about my age sweeping the floor and putting things away. And when I told Mrs. Wexton about my being in New York and attending college, the girl looked at me. We were about the same age. She looked at me hard. She looked at me saying, without saying, "You think you better than me. You think because you went east, talk different, that you're better than me." And as Mrs. Wexton called herself telling me off, the girl was smirking. There was a smirk on her face as if to say, "That's what you get for not keeping your place. That's just what you get." In that moment, I was filled with hate. I was filled with hatred that black girl, and she hated me. I drove home and I told my family what happened. My father looked at me and said, Louisa, you should feel sorry for her. I know who she is. I know her family. You should feel bad for her. And then I raved. I raved and said, that girl got mad at me because I wasn't cleaning Mrs. Wexton's floor. She's a Tom. And I can't believe you're defending her. And again, my father said, Louisa, sometimes you can know so much and yet know so little. And when he said that, I was livid. I said, that girl is a Tom, Dad, and you defending her makes you a Tom. And before I could finish my sentence, my mother pushed my father aside and she slapped me. She slapped me palm to face and backhand to face, saying, don't you ever call your father that. Ever. The reason why you're alive and have that education that you have is because he's strong. If you ever feel that he's a Tom, that's when you leave this house and never return. It was cut off, so I just added that at the end because it was cut off. But yeah, that is the cold read.
Wow. It was the ma'am for me. I love that.
Everything in the ma'am.
Yeah. I asked you, like, several times you said on this interview, I am not an actress. And you said that. Can I ask you what place that's coming from and why you feel that you're not?
I guess because I don't know. I've always done things under singing. And so I guess I'm more comfortable singing than I am acting, because acting is few and far between for me. Most of the time when people reach out to me is for singing. And so when it comes to acting, it's something I love. It's something I love to do. I like to pretend to be other people. It's 7 of us, but I'm the youngest. And so it's 6 kids, then 9 years, then me. So I did have a lot of, as my sisters would say, I had a lot of imaginary friends. So, maybe that's a place that I can draw from, but I don't know. I guess because even though I love it, it's a passion for me. It's not something I do on the regular. Although my students used to say that I always put on a show. I was just always trying to make class interesting so that they would come, so that they would show, so that I could get as much information into them as possible. But I like reading, and I like reading to people when they want to be read to, if they'll allow me to. So
I think the crazy thing is, when you say you don't act, I know I've been privileged for you to be in 2 of my shows, and they were not small parts. They were not.
True.
Yeah, both roles did have singing in it. but
True.
that was such a small part of the work you had to do
Yeah.
in those roles, that just because you may not do it as often as you may like to, you are an actress. You're also a singer, but it may be because people always put you in the category of singer that you can't maybe see that it's more than singing. You would be somebody who would be considered a double threat, you know. You would be, you know,
Okay.
because you sing, but you know, in no small terms, you act your ass off. Like you know, because the way you go into role, and I think your English background and your passion for reading, all of those things enhance your ability when you are on stage. And even though you may not be on stage all the time, there are a lot of people who hit the stage a lot, but they haven't done the work. So it doesn't really matter how often you hit the stage, it's what you do when you hit the stage. And what you do when you hit the stage, you are an actress.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. We really appreciate you. I've heard about you, and I'm so glad I'm finally getting to meet you. And I understand, you know, just the feeling of passion versus what's actually happening in real life. You know what I mean? And I implore you to keep with this side of you, because I was blown away with your cold read. It's probably one of the best ones I've seen in a while. So,
oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on and Cyn. And I wish you nothing but the best. I know it's already here, but better than best.
Lights, camera,
Thank you.
The